Hi class, in this Excel instructional video I'm going to show you how to create graphs using graphs for categorical and quantitative variables. I'm going to use for this video Excel 2016 for Mac. So we'll start with categorical variables. You can see here that I have some data that you might recognize from an earlier video that gives the 2014 distribution of movies within each of these movie genres for that year. So before we begin making any graphs, I just want to show you the power of Excel and doing some quick calculations for you to save you some time. So here we have a frequency table. We know what the distribution of movies is based on these counts for each of those categories. But sometimes I want what's called the relative frequency table, right? I want to know the percent of those movies. It might give me a little bit better of an understanding of how those movies are distributed. So to calculate that, the first thing I might want to know is what's the total number of movies. So I'm going to put that total in this cell right down here by clicking equals, typing sum, parenthesis, and then it's asking me for which cells it wants me to add together. So I'm going to highlight the cells by going to the first one, clicking and holding and highlighting all the cells. And once I've finished, let go and end the parenthesis. So it looks like there's 564 total movies within each of these categories. So to calculate the percent, if I dig back to my math classes, I know that a percent is my count divided by my total times 100. So I'm going to click on this cell and I'm going to say equals my count divided by my total. And I'm just clicking on the cells to get this. And I want parentheses around that for this, so I'm just going to go to right before my B2, and I'm going to put a parenthesis, and then I'm going to end the parenthesis, multiply by 100. So it looks like about 20% of the movies were action or adventure movies. And I can copy that formula down really easily in Excel. When we do it the first time, we're going to get an error, but I want to show you that error so we can show you how to troubleshoot it if it happens to you. So to drag the formula down, I just click on this box here, and I pull down to highlight all the cells I want that formula to be copied into. And look, I'm getting this error that says divide by 0. So I want to find out more about what that error is telling me. So I'm going to click on one of these. And I see it's taking B3, which is this count here. That's good. But it's dividing it by B7, which is this empty cell right here. That's not what I want. I want it to divide by the total, which is B6. I want it to always divide by the total. So from my original formula, I want it to always divide by B6. So without having to change each of these formulas here, I want to show you a trick. If I want it to hold this number all the time and not change, I'm going to tell it to hold by putting dollar signs. Dollar sign means hold column B. Dollar sign here means hold row 6. So it's going to keep that cell all the time. Then I'm going to recopy my formula down. Now I'm getting the right distribution. Okay, so now that we know how to have Excel do some of those things, let's have Excel give us a pie chart. So let's highlight the data that we want pie charted. That's this right here. And we're going to go to Insert. And we see a pie chart right here. I'm going to click pie. I'm not going to click any of these 3D or weirdo ones, right, because they violate the area principle. They're not, the areas that they show aren't going to be representative of the true area. So I'm just going to do a plain old pie chart. It's pretty good. All right, so my pie chart, colorful, but it's not giving me all the information I want. First, I want a title. I want my title to be Movie Genres 2014. So to change it, all I had to do was click on the title. But I actually also want my data to show up in here. So I'm going to highlight here, and I'm going to go to Add Chart Element Data Labels. I want my data labels to show up maybe inside of my pie chart. Okay, so there they are. Those are my numbers. They're a little small, so I'm going to click on them and I'm going to go back to home. I'm going to make them a little bit bigger. Okay. All right, but I also might want these labels right here inside. So in order to get those labels inside my pie chart, I'm going to go to Add Chart Element, Data Labels, More Data Label Options. You're going to see a bunch of options show up over here. I actually wanted to show the category name inside. So see now, just for this one, because that's the only one I had highlighted by accident, it's showing me the category name. So to make sure that it does that for all of them, I'm just going to highlight them all. And I'm going to go to label options here underneath that chart. I'm going to say category names. So there they are. They're all showing up. Okay, and so it gives me all the information that I want there. I can play around with this a little bit to neaten it up. And that's going to be really up to you to make your pie chart look as nice as possible. You can change colors, all that kind of stuff, but I'll leave that to you to play around with. The only other thing that you might want to do, because it's redundant, is to remove this here. So you can just delete that out. Okay, so that's how you make a pie chart. Next up, we want to make a bar graph. Okay, so I'm going to highlight that same data, and we're going to go to Insert. And here we can see something that looks like a bar chart. So I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to choose the clustered column one. All right, so there we go. We've got our distribution. The only thing I want to do here is change this to movie genres 2014, but otherwise it looks like everything's labeled pretty well. I don't know, I don't really have a vertical axis label. Remember that vertical axis is count. So I'm going to go back over here to where it says add chart element, and I want my primary vertical label to be on here. Call that counts. Oops. All right, and there you go. And again, you can edit things like the colors and the size of the font, type of font, all that, but I'll let you play around with that to figure that out. Let's say that you wanted to do your percents instead. You could easily do that by clicking, since they're not next to each other, if you click each of the columns separately. So I'm going to click my movie genres column. Sorry, I'm going to hold the command button. I'm going to click my percents column so that those are both highlighted. And I can go back to Insert, back to my chart, my clustered column. It's basically going to be the same thing, but just in terms of percents. So it's going to give me my relative frequency distribution. I'm going to retitle it, Movie Genres 2014. And I'm again, oops, got the M in movie. And I'm going to again add my vertical axis label over here. Axis primary vertical. And I'm going to label it, instead of counts, I'm going to say percent. All right. All right, so next we're going to do a different set of categorical data when we're looking at multiple variables. Okay, so here I have another set of data that you'll probably recognize. This is the distribution of cars in a parking lot, students versus staff for different makes of cars. Okay, so the kind of graph that I might want to make here is that segmented bar graph. So in order to make one of those, I'm just going to highlight my data, say Insert, and when I click up here, I could do my stacked column. That's the same thing as a segmented bar graph. So I'm going to click on it. There it is. Again, I'm missing some information. I want to put makes of cars in parking lot. And I want to add my primary axis label by going over to axis titles, primary vertical, call that counts. Okay, but here I can see the distribution. Okay. I also might want to look at the percentages. So I'll show you another one that might help me compare the two. So I'm going to highlight this again, Insert, go back to my bar graphs, and I see this 100% stacked column. This is going to turn these into relative frequencies. All right, so we can see that within each category of American, European, and Asian cars, it's going to show me the percent of each that are owned by student and staff. So if I look at American cars, I can see over here just by the numbers, it's approximately 50%, 50%, 50-50, half and half. When I look here, I see my bar is half and half. So this is a way to more easily compare how the cars are distributed. So I can see if there's any relationships there. Okay, so while we talk about this, all I'm gonna do is change my titles. Okay, and what this allows me to do is see if there's any relationships here. Is there something about being a student versus being a staff member, that changes the type of car that you choose? Well, I would say that this one does. Since these all are broken down differently, the story that I could tell here is that, I don't know, look, blue is students. Look, students are more likely to own European cars. And it looks like staff are more likely to own American cars. That's a story you can tell. So that means that there must be a relationship between the two variables, the variables being whether you're student or staff and make of car. So it looks like there's an association between student, staff versus make of car, just based on looking at this graph. Okay, finally, we're going to look at quantitative data. All right, so again, you've seen this data before. We're going to look at how to make a histogram for a set of quantitative data. This was the number of games that Wayne Gretzky played in for each season that he played in the NHL. Okay, so here's our data. In order to make a histogram, we're going to use the data analysis tool pack. So you want to make sure that your data analysis tool pack is turned on. So you're going to go up here to tools and you're going to go to add-ins. You just want to make sure that this analysis tool pack is checked. If you're using a different version of Excel, you may not have this as an option. If you don't have this as an option, we will need to talk. Okay, so you're going to press OK. One thing that you have some control over, Excel will do this for you, but if you want to have some control over the width of the bins so that they make sense, you're going to need to make a column called bin. And what you're going to do is put the starting point for every bin. And what I want to start with is thinking about the range of the data that I have here. One way to do that is to reorder the data if you want, but if we can just look at our smallest value is 45, and our largest value, it looks like, is 80. So what we might do is go by, maybe we'll go by tens. So we'll start at 40. Our first bin will go 40 to 49, then 50 to 59, 60 to 69, 70 to 79, and then 80 to 89. Okay, so we're setting our own bin width. We would need to do that before we get started. All right, so now to actually create the histogram, we're going to go to Data, Data Analysis. Gives us a lot of options here, but we want histogram. Press OK. And it's already made some choices for me. Made the correct choices. All right, so my input, my data is in column A. Okay, if it didn't do that for me, I could just press this arrow, go over here and just select it, highlight it myself, and get back by pressing this again. And my bin range is actually not correct. It's saying my bin range is in C. It's not. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to select right here to tell it that's where my bins are. That's how I want it to break down the columns. And yes, my first row is label, so I'm going to check that. And I need to tell it where to put the information. So I'm going to click here and I'm just going to click a cell. And I do want it to make a chart for me, so I need to make sure that that is checked off. Say OK. All right, so it does a couple things. It actually tells me how many values are going to be within each bin. Okay, so if I look here, I can see that, oh, I see, it's giving me the max. Okay, so 40 is really the max. So I'm going to need to add another row here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so let's have it recalculate this for us. I'm going to delete all this out. Sorry, start over. Okay. I'm going to, so what I was doing was giving it a maximum value, which is why it wasn't giving me anything. So I don't really need this 40, I guess, but I'll leave it there and we'll see what it does. Okay, so now I'm going to go again. I'm going to go to Data, Data Analysis, Histogram. Okay. My input range is in the A column, so I'm just going to click on that, highlight it. Okay. My bin range is in D, but I'm just going to click on it one more time just to make it, oh, it doesn't have everything. So I'm going to highlight everything. Click over here on the arrow. I do have labels in the first row, so I want to make sure that's selected. I want to select a place to put the output. So I just usually select a cell. And I do want it to make a chart. I'm going to say OK. All right. So this makes a lot more sense. So the values that are smaller than 50, does it make sense that there are two values smaller than 50? I don't know, let's see. So we have 45 and we have 48. So yes, it's counting up the frequencies that come before this one. Okay, and then let's see. Do I have three values that are smaller than 90, but not including 80? Looks like it. Okay, so it looks like these are giving you the upper range of each of the bins. Okay, so each bin is going to end at this value. So it's going to go 61. So this is 31 to 40, 49 to no, sorry. This is going 31 to 40, 41 to 50, 51 to 60, 61 to 70, 71 to 80, 81 to 90. Okay, so when I look at my histogram that it created, looks pretty good. The only issues that I have here are that in a histogram, remember, your columns need to touch one another. So I'm just going to double click on a column, and this is going to come up, give me some options for how I can change some things. I want my gap width to be 0. Okay, so that's a proper histogram. I also don't want my title to be histogram. I think I want my title to be something like number of games per season. Maybe I'll start it with Wayne Gretzky. All right, and then here, this isn't just bin, this is number of games per season. And this is the frequency for that. Okay, so now I have a nice histogram that I can look at and think about what the distribution of my data is. And I can always change my bins. So if I don't like the way this looks, I can go back and change my bins. Maybe I want to have more segments. So I might change my bins to go by 5s. You can also let Excel do it for you, but sometimes you get cutoffs that are like 50.32, and that doesn't really going to make a lot of sense for you. Okay, so if we were to describe this, remember you're looking at shape, center, and spread. Looks unimodal. Looks like there's a gap, potentially. I don't know if you would call this an outlier, definitely a gap. I might make a different histogram with more columns, more bars, but you would be able to use this to describe the distribution.